universities you're interested in on UCAS, as well as talking through a bits of the application process and the support that's available. So we'll first look at the dates for the admissions cycle. So these are the dates for anyone who is looking to start university in autumn 2025. So as you can see, the applications opened on the 3rd of September and the first deadline is the 15th of October. So that deadline is for people who are thinking of applying to medicine, veterinary medicine or veterinary science, for dentistry or for any courses at Oxford and Cambridge. And it's really important to remember for those courses that for Oxford and Cambridge, you can only apply to one or the other. You need to choose between those two universities if you're wanting to apply there. And if you're applying for medicine, veterinary medicine or science, or dentistry, you have 5 UCAS choices normally, but for these courses, you can use 4, and then your 5th choice needs to be a different program. So for example, if you're interested in medicine, you can apply to 4 medical programs, and then your 5th choice should be something a bit different, so perhaps biomedical science, something similar to that. So for anyone who's not interested in those courses or perhaps is applying to a different university than Oxford and Cambridge, we have our equal consideration date, which is in January, and that's for all of those other programs. So we would recommend that people try and work towards those deadlines, because the reason we have that is to make sure that universities can't close their courses to give everyone a fair chance at applying. And for both those dates, the application deadline is 6 p.m. UK time. So you're at an advantage because you're ahead of us in time zones, but make sure that you're working to UK time for those deadlines. Students are still able to apply after that 29th of January deadline, up until the 30th of June in the main cycle, but just be aware that if your child is interested in a very competitive course, it may be closed, it may be full after the 29th of January. So if all possible, we'd say try and get the application in by one of those deadlines. We also have something called clearing, which opens after the 30th of June. And that is for students who either have not received an offer during the main cycle, they can apply directly into clearing, perhaps they've decided to apply a little bit later, or once they've received their results, they can perhaps explore other options of where they'd like to go. This might be they didn't achieve the grades, or it might be they've achieved much higher grades, so they can look at a wider variety of options available to them. So we'll look at the research phase now. So we have something called the UCAS Hub, which students can use from as young as about age 12, 13. So they can start looking at this very young and start thinking about what it is that they might want to be doing when they go to university. And this is completely free to use. So when you go onto our website, we'll ask a couple of details and students can set up their own account. And this means that they can like and favourite things and to keep them all in one handy location. So when they want to look back at it, maybe 6 months down the line, if they're a bit younger, they can find that easily. And this is a really great way for them to talk to the people who are supporting them with their application as well, whether that's you as parents, whether that's the counsellor at their school, or if you're using an agent to help with the applications. It helps put a list together as a starting point for a conversation. So we have around 40,000 courses at 360 plus different institutions. So there will be something for every student. So we try and personalize that to make that a bit more specific to the student rather than them having to look through all of those courses. For students who are maybe a bit undecided about what it is they might want to study, we have our careers quiz, and this is really useful to show what kind of a profession might be suited. And it does this through a personality test. So it will draw out things like perhaps your child is very interested in working in a job with people, so they might want to go into a caring type profession, or perhaps they really like working with data, so it would recommend a program more similar to computer science for them. And if they don't like the courses that it suggests to them, that's fine, they don't have to take those. It's just a good starting point again for students who maybe are a bit unclear. So we also have some additional resources, which I'm just going to talk you through now. So we have our city guides. So we know that for a lot of people, perhaps they haven't had the opportunity to come to the UK before they apply to study. So they can use these location guides to understand a bit about where it is they are thinking about studying and see whether that would be a good fit for them. So it will say things like the size of the city, the demographics of the city. We know that for some people, having that community where they can interact with other people from their home country is very important to them. And there'll also be things like where it's located in the UK, like things how near it is to an airport, if it's at the beach, if it's in the countryside, a big city, things like that to help with making those decisions. We also have our subject guides, which are a really important part of your research process before you even get to doing that application form, to understand what it is they're applying to, because some courses might have quite similar names but be quite different. So for example, something like English literature, at one university you might be studying Shakespeare, at another one you might be studying 20th century literature, which is very different. So make sure that you're researching into the subjects as well. And we'd also recommend that you use something we've got on our website for free called UniBuddy, which connects students to students already taking that course. And you can do this, it shows the nationality of the student as well. If you want to talk to another student from Hong Kong, you can do that. But it just gives that more peer-to-peer experience they can understand from someone who's in a similar position to them. So we'll move on to the application form. So to complete the UCAS application, as I mentioned, students first need to register for that hub account, and they can do that a lot before the year that they're wanting to come and study with us. That's absolutely fine, and then they can keep that account with them. But if they are getting ready to apply next September, obviously they should start making this account right now. Do that research, and this is the same place they'll start that application. So they'll go through the application form, and then if they are applying linked to a registered centre, and that may either be their school or that may be an agent if you're working with an agent. And once they've completed the form, they click pay and send, and that will go to their registered centre. So then the advisor at their registered centre, so again, the agent that you're working with or the school counsellor, will review the application. They will add the reference letter and any predicted grades that need to go into there, and then they will send that to us at UCAS. If they have identified anything in that form that perhaps needs changing, then they will send it back to your child, and then they can amend that and then send it back to their counsellor advisor to review again. Then once we receive that at UCAS, we will process that, and then we will send that on to the universities and colleges, and they will make that decision. So just to emphasize that we don't make the application decisions at UCAS, it's done directly by the universities and colleges, but they will be able to see those decisions in their UCAS hub. And once they receive their decisions, if they're fortunate enough to receive multiple offers to study, they would need to choose a firm choice, which is the place that if they make the grades, that's where they're looking to go, and an insurance choice. And the insurance choice should always have lower grades than their firm choice, because that's kind of like their backup option if the grades don't go quite as planned. But they should be happy to go to either of them, because obviously they could end up at either of them. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through some of the sections of the application form where people tend to have the most difficulties, and some of our newer sections that you might not have come across before. So the where you live section is a new section for this year, and this is where we ask students to input where they've been living for the past 3 years prior to starting their course, and that's just to make sure that they're getting the right fee status assessment. They can also say why they've been living there, so perhaps that's where their permanent home is, or perhaps they're living temporarily in Hong Kong because of your work, so they can indicate that. And then again, the universities will use that information to make sure that any visa requirements, if applicable, or any fee status is done correctly by the university. And this saves the university having to send you lots of forms after the application's been received. We also have a nationality section, which involves some questions around if there's been any previous study in the UK, and if the student feels that they need a visa. So for example, if you are visa exempt due to nationality or something like that, you can indicate this here, and that will help the universities again with understanding that situation. Another section that people tend to trip up on a little bit in the application form is the education section. So what we've done here is we've taken out some of the questions that people found quite confusing, and we've moved over the English language requirement to this section. We know that for a lot of people in Hong Kong, perhaps your qualifications will exempt your child from having to take a formal English qualification anyway, because it might be met through their academic study, but we'd say that you always should check that with the university. Just make sure that they're happy to accept the qualification in the place of an IELTS or a TOEFL before, because obviously you don't want to miss out on booking that test in if that is something that you need. And then in the education section, so typically you would need to link to your school as a registered centre, and once you've done that, that will pre-populate some of the education section for you, and that will bring up a short list of the qualifications that are shown at your child's school, and that they can just select from that list. It should be nice and simple. I'll show you on the next slide how inputting the qualifications should look. If your school is not listed or for some reason you're not linked to your school, that's fine. You can still manually input the school, and then you can just search for the qualifications that your child is studying. You also get asked to indicate if you're studying in person or online at that school, and whether perhaps if they're just resitting an exam, for example, you can say it's an exam only venue. You can also indicate if your student is studying there full-time or part-time. Perhaps, some students might study part-time in person at a school and then take classes online from somewhere else. So you can put in multiple different institutions where you're studying as well, to really support with that. And then this is an overview of how it should look when you come to that page after linking your school. So it will automatically pull up, by the fact that your child's indicated they're at a school in Hong Kong, the local qualifications, and then they can select from that list. But if they're not studying the local qualifications, what they can do is they can click on that button that's highlighted in pink, and then they can use that blue search bubble next to that to type in the name of their qualification. But with that, they should probably do that with the guidance of their school, just to make sure that they are picking the correct curriculum and things like that, because sometimes there's multiple. For example, if you're putting in A levels, there may be multiple A levels, so just make sure they're putting in the right one in there. We also say at this section, obviously we know people might not have their grades yet, and that's absolutely fine. So they should input any qualifications with the grade that they've achieved. Any that they're waiting on, they need to input that qualification and then put pending next to the grade. And the grades which are pending will be the ones that the school counsellor or the agent will be asked to input the predicted grades for. And if you are a family that is working with an agent, we recommend for the reference and the predicted grades that it should still be someone who's been involved in the education of your child who's inputting that. So we'd encourage that they work closely with the school to try and get that information from the school directly wherever possible. Okay, and just something else to point out specifically for Hong Kong as well. So the other sections on the application form that sometimes cause a little bit of difficulty is the name section. So we know that in Hong Kong, obviously, like the name structure is a bit different to how it is in the UK, because the family name may come first. So we'd say that make sure in the name section, what you're doing is you're putting the name exactly as it is in your child's passport, because that's what we'll use to cross-reference against when we're checking those qualifications. So make sure that it matches the passport and the name as it is on their qualification documents is the best way to do that section correctly. We've also got a section that is about disclosures. So that's to do with if your child has any support needs. So perhaps if they need access arrangements, maybe they've got a mobility issue. It's really important they put that in the application form. It doesn't affect the decision that the university makes, but it's really good to ensure that if they need that, perhaps a special room in the accommodation, they've got that in progress really early on rather than leaving it till just before they're about to arrive. Okay, and then we're going to talk through the personal statement. So I'm not sure how many of you today are applying for 2025 versus 2026. So for 2025, the personal statement is the same process that it's always been. And there are lots of resources on the UCAS website about how to complete that statement. The principles of what we're going to expect in the statement are the same in this format that's finishing in 2025 and the new format, which will start from 2026. But the reason we have reformed the personal statement is to make the process easier specifically for international students as well, and make it that students who perhaps don't have that really high level support from their advisors in their schools are also able to feel confident that they know that what they're writing in this statement is correct. So it's the same information expected, but it's just providing a scaffold for them to know what it is they should be putting in there. And we know as well that international students, so students from outside the UK, they maybe are applying to multiple countries. So it helps with that as well, because what we expect in the UK is very different from what's expected in a US admissions essay, for example. So it helps them with understanding what it is that we're needing to put in there. So these are the new questions that are going to be in the personal statement for students 2026 and onwards, but the points of what these questions are asking should still be included in statements for 2025. So the first question is about the why. So a student, your child, should be putting in there about why they want to study that course, so their motivation. So this could be something really obvious, like I really love animals, so I'm interested in veterinary science, or it could be something a bit more obscure. So perhaps they watched the Met Gala, they loved one of the dresses, they researched the designer, found out all about sustainable fashion, and now they're interested in environmental science. The second question is about how the qualifications that they've taken in school have prepared them for that course. Again, this could be very obvious. So perhaps they've taken biology A level and that will help them with the anatomy in a medicine degree. Or it could be a transferable skill. So perhaps they've studied history, which needs a high level of research, and that's then prepared them well to take a law degree where that attention to detail, dates, facts is really important. They can also discuss what they've learned from the experience of their studies. So things like perhaps good time management, good organization skills, if they've had to do presentations, perhaps good teamwork and things like that. And then the third question is about what have you done to prepare outside of education and why is this useful? So perhaps someone's done some volunteering or perhaps they have taken an additional course online. But it could be something, it doesn't have to be big, grand experience like that. It could be something as little as they're interested in medicines, they've followed some dermatologists on Instagram. And what we're looking for here is then to explain the experience, but also reflect on it, on how that helped them explore that interest and what they feel they've gained from that experience as well. And that could be an insight that perhaps they've understood that about the hours of the job, that it's a very demanding job, something like that, just to show that they are going above and beyond to really explore that passion. And then these are just some top tips for the application. So firstly, as I mentioned earlier, make sure the name is accurate and presented on the academic certificates and the passport. Pay attention to any communications from UCAS and any deadlines that your school sets as well. Your school might set slightly different deadlines, but make sure that you're paying attention to those to have the best chance of kind of meeting those deadlines, and make sure that the course isn't closed and things like that. And sometimes when decisions are sent by universities, they might have actions that your child needs to do by a certain date, such as send us your language test by this date, and make sure that they are meeting those deadlines again. Research is key. So as I mentioned in all the slides earlier, research is really, really important, and we want to make sure that your students and your children will not only succeed on their course and but we also want them to have a really enjoyable experience, love the place that they're going to be living for the next 3 years. Reach out is a really good tip. So if you're not sure about something, students are very welcome to contact the universities, and they can contact the admissions team, or they can contact the international recruitment team at the university, who'll be happy to speak to them, or they can also contact UCAS directly on the phone or on social media as well, and we'll be happy to help them. And then the other one is about making sure that if they are linked to their school, they use that qualifications shortlist that their school has set up, because that is there to avoid those errors. And I'm just going to highlight a few resources for you that we have available, and then we can go for some questions. Okay. So, oh, sorry, I think I've clicked one too far. So we have a new guide for parents. We release a guide every year updated. This is free for you to download on the UCAS website. And for this year, for the first time, we have some dedicated international pages in there. One page is all about fees and funding for international students, and one page is about the arrivals experience and things to think about for those students. Okay. So that was the main resource. So we'll go to the questions now, and then I will share a copy of these slides with the British Council as well, so they can pass out these resources to you as well from the attendance list. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Becca. So we take the questions now.
Okay, yeah, that's great.